And welcome back to the market. Well, before I give you the best bear case, the best bull case, and I give you my opinion, we have some explosive information today, so please stay tuned. I want to thank my viewer, Bailey. She asked a very important question that led me to do some serious analysis on Quant, Bitcoin, Bitcoin ETF, and some other questions that we might have based on the explosive information I'm about to present here. There's been a lot of YouTubers saying that Quant will not hit this bull market, but in 2030 in general. Thoughts? Well, let's just specifically look at price. If you take a look at the chart that we have here in front of you right now, the white line represents the price action of Quant. The orange line represents the price action of Bitcoin. They have been set on an equivalent percentage scale. So Bitcoin, you can see right now, is sitting at 43.86%. Quant is sitting at 29.55%. And then you can work out the difference there between those two. So if we take a look at the history of this price action, this is what we have to work out in order to answer Bailey's question about whether, is Quant going to take off or not? What's going on here? So you can see these highlighted regions, and I've done a study here to see if Quant generally moves with Bitcoin or not and how they move together. So in this region, in this first highlighted region here, you can see that as Bitcoin is hitting a peak, Quant is on the way up and then eventually hits its peak right about there, and Bitcoin is beginning to go down at that point. Now that might be what some people would say, oh, maybe they might refer to that as an alt season perhaps. Now here you can see same thing again, Bitcoin in the orange is at a peak, Quant is also at a peak. You can see the same thing here in this highlighted region. Bitcoin is at a peak, Quant is at a peak, but Quant is generally on its way down even though it's peaking there, okay? And Bitcoin is generally still on its way up. I want you to notice though, as this is happening, look, Quant is the value, comparatively speaking, Quant is still maintaining a higher percentage value comparatively with Bitcoin. Now, let's take a look at this highlighted region. We get basically the same thing, a peak on Bitcoin, a peak on Quant. But now here we have some differentiation in this green highlighted region here. Now we can see that, Bitcoin in the orange doesn't have much of a move at all. It's almost like a little W reversal, and in the middle of the W there's a little hump there, but whoa, Quant really takes off on that, right? So that's a true divergence in my opinion, where you really see Quant doing something that's almost completely opposite of Bitcoin. We can see that again here in this green highlighted box. The same situation, little kind of W reversal there with Bitcoin, little tiny hump, not much of anything. Quant responds a lot more percentage move up to the upside. Now here we have the typical pattern, they're following each other. Here we have a divergence in the opposite direction in red. This time we have Bitcoin peaking and we have Quant on the way down with not much of a little move up at all really when Bitcoin hits its peak. It's generally still on its way down. And then we go back to those divergences in the opposite direction again. Very similar situation there. Bitcoin is dipping a bit and Quant has a nice little spike in its percentage, and then we see another divergence in the opposite direction here, where we see Quant on the way down in a trough, but Bitcoin peaking. And that's a very interesting divergence right there, because that's a really strong one comparatively to the last red highlighted box that we saw before. This one to me seems even stronger than that one. And so we can see that generally speaking they move together with some divergences. Now, the purple boxes represent divergences that are happening when they cross. So you can see here that Bitcoin was a little bit higher percentage-wise in value than Quant on the way down in a downtrend here. You can see the same thing here, that Bitcoin is a little bit more valuable than Quant in the downtrend here. But this time we have something really significant happening, and we have to ask ourselves some questions about this because this is strange. Here we see that Bitcoin, for the first time, is much more valuable percentage-wise than Quant. Why is this happening? Well, the first thought I had was that perhaps we're looking at an alt season situation. So I brought up the charts to look at that, to see if maybe the altcoins were behind Bitcoin as well. They are not. They are generally moving together. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe if I take Ethereum out. So I went and looked at the altcoin 3 chart. Same thing. There's really not a significant difference. They're generally moving together. There's not this kind of divergence when it comes to percent value. And so I thought, okay, self, maybe the Bitcoin ETF has something to do with this. And what are the questions we have to ask ourselves about that as wolves? Well, we have to ask ourselves, does this mean that Bitcoin is going to break down and Quant is really that stable coin that's telling us where the market is really at? Or does this mean that Quant is about to have an explosive move to the upside and we want to be in on that when it happens? And so, how do we answer this question? Well, what I did is I looked at the Google history for searching for the term Bitcoin ETF to see when were we having massive searches for that happen, when were we having smaller searches for that happen. Can that clue us in to anything that's going on? Let's take a look at a different chart here for just a moment. We are currently looking at the Bitcoin chart. And as you can see, I have some highlighted areas here for you as well. And those highlighted areas in the vertical up and down are significant in showing us a correlation between Bitcoin ETF searches over time. Okay, so back here, starting at about January 2021, all the way up until roughly about March 2021, there were a lot of searches about a Bitcoin ETF. Now, this had to have been retail searching here because, look, we're way high to the upside. And what's retail thinking? Well, we've got to have an ETF around the corner, right? Okay, so look at this highlighted area here. This is interesting here because this is actually, let's take this down to the monthly time frame. All right, generally that time frame that I told you before is still holding though, okay? So, you know, right here, everybody's like, wow, ETF's got to be around the corner, all right? Now, here in June of 2022 is when we have a spike, a small spike in Bitcoin ETFs. Why would that be happening right here? We're on our way down. Retail's going to be thinking, man, Bitcoin ETF? No way. We also get small spikes in the searches for Bitcoin ETF here in November 2022 and here in March 2023. Now, look at the market at this point, okay? Remember the sentiment down here? Remember how everybody thought that we were like possibly going back down to like 15,000 being in the cards at that point? There was so much just bearish sentiment in the market, yet we have these small spikes in Bitcoin ETF here, right? And then we generally have a little larger uptick here, but this is still just a small spike in March of 2023. Now, the reason I have these two highlighted in green is because what those searches are telling me on Google Trends is that that is likely not retail searching. That is small numbers of people that are probably in the know. Well, what do they know? We've got to understand is that we got news about BlackRock, Fidelity, Grayscale. You know, we got news about these other institutions buying for their ETF. Was it October 2023? No, I don't think we really heard December is when the news really started to spike. I do remember that. Well, I'll have my chart out to the side here so we can see that. But in any case, point being is that the searches for the ETF on Google go way up in this area here. This is when retail knows this thing is about to happen. This is where retail starts to buy in right here. But that's not when the institutions were buying. That's not public knowledge. We don't know when the institutions bought. We can infer based on those tiny blips in the search for the ETF that insiders were searching for this, or people who were around insiders that wanted to see if they could find any news on a Bitcoin ETF and maybe get ahead of the curve, right? This is where those searches happen, those two little bumps. And it's likely that this is the area where the institutions were buying Bitcoin. And this is where it matters for volume. Now let's look down here at our volume. Between here and here is likely when institutions were buying. And these blocks right here are probably when that was happening. Okay? Now, when does retail start buying? Retail starts buying through here. Okay? Because now they get the news. They knew the news. They knew what they were doing. They've gotten in at the lows. This white box represents generally where the institutions have probably bought in. So that's roughly just an estimation based on those certain inferences we can make. They're likely in between $16,466, maybe even a little lower, actually, if we bring that down to the tip of that candle. So about $14,946.46, and possibly $29,542.43. Retail is buying in a little bit in that area, but mostly buying in up here off the news. Now, the thing is retail is actually driving this up. Look at the volume. Okay, so now is retail going to get tired of buying? I don't know. I think they're still very bullish. And what retail doesn't understand is that my friends that are buying into the Bitcoin ETF, they're not affecting this volume down here of Bitcoin anymore. It has nothing to do with that anymore. This has everything to do... See, all of that news just has driven Bitcoin up, and partially because we came off of a low. And you can generally see that through, I would call this region right here, generally, let's call them smart retail, generally the area where smarter retail is buying in. Okay, and you can see that historically back here in these order blocks as well. All right, so that's likely what's going on. And I don't see retail breaking down anytime soon. We have to watch this month of February and see how we close. We have to watch Bitcoin on our lower time frames and see how we close. So go back to my previous video from last time. I do think this week, at least, Bitcoin is looking very bullish. Okay, maybe with some drawback I talked about, but I did say I was leaning into the bull case, but kind of making a case that we might have some consolidation as well. What does this mean for Quant? Let's go back to our other chart. What this likely means for Quant is that Quant is behind. And it's never historically been, you can see back here, it's never historically been this far behind Bitcoin. This is a major divergence. And with the increasing price and increasing volume on Bitcoin, I think Quant is behind. As long as, here's the caveat, as long as Bitcoin can hold these levels and continue up, I think Quant is going to have an explosive move up to the upside. And I want you to look at the history here. Generally, Quant is, I would say, from about, this 83.75% mark to roughly the 3.88% mark right there. It's roughly in that range. So on the high side, see, Quant is mostly staying above Bitcoin as far as percentage of value. And it has spent a lot of time on the high side here. Okay? So if we were to break let's just do a measured move, right? So if we were to break just up to meet Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is at, we're talking about, what are we talking about? Roughly an 11% move to the upside. If we generally go back to the high side of being more valuable than Bitcoin, like we generally are on Quant, you're talking about a 39% to 40%. Even if it were to go a little, let's get crazy. What if it actually chopped high? Let's call this the highs, right? Maybe an 82% increase in value on Quant. So, Quant is at some lows right now for sure. And, my case on Quant, if you watched the weekly video, is that I think we have some more low chop in store. And then, we might be putting in a major reversal at some point soon. We just need Bitcoin to hold these levels. Now, the bear case is, of course, that Bitcoin cannot hold these levels. And in February and March, Bitcoin breaks down and meets Quant. And Quant was just telling us the entire time, hey, you all are way too bullish over nothing. However, if I saw the volume flows on Bitcoin looking really awful from retail, I would be like, yeah, there's just no way this is going to hold. Bitcoin's just going to come down and meet Quant. I think there's a stronger case that Quant is going to have a massive move up. That's your bear case. That's your bull case. That's my opinion. We will see you next time on The Market Wolf.